When we say that this psalm becomes a blueprint for inner financial alignment, we are acknowledging something deeper than words on a page. We're talking about a spiritual architecture that shapes the way you think, feel, and move in the world. Most people struggle financially not because they are incapable, not because they lack opportunity, but because their internal structure, their beliefs, their expectations, their emotional posture has never been rebuilt. They are trying to construct abundance on a foundation that was shaped by fear, scarcity, and uncertainty. But when a psalm carries divine intention, it becomes more than a prayer. It becomes a psychological map that guides the mind toward clarity and the spirit toward confidence. You see, the psalm speaks to the invisible architecture of your life. It reaches into places you hardly pay attention to, the subconscious assumptions that tell you what is possible, the quiet doubts that whisper you are unworthy, the emotional patterns that push you towards survival mode instead of growth. And when you begin to recite it daily, you are not merely reading, you are retraining. You are reprogramming old patterns that once sabotaged your decisions. You are rewiring automatic reactions that once pulled you away from opportunities. The psalm becomes a tool that aligns your thinking with the mindset required for financial expansion. Think for a moment about the connection between spiritual truth and psychological alignment. Humans don't act from information, they act from identity. They move according to the image they carry of themselves. If that image is small, their actions will be small. If that image is fearful, their decisions will be hesitant. If that image is shaped by past financial wounds, failures, disappointments, rejections, then the present will feel like a battlefield. But the psalm gently interrupts this internal narrative. It speaks with authority into the places where your confidence has been fractured. It fills the inner space with a language that lifts your self-concept and redirects your emotional energy. This is why speaking the psalm becomes essential. It is not magic, it is alignment. Scripture carries power, but that power must be internalized. It must be repeated until it dissolves the inner resistance that has held you back. As you speak it, your emotional atmosphere begins to shift. You notice yourself becoming more stable, more grounded, more courageous. Even your intuition sharpens. You begin recognizing opportunities that were always there, but previously hidden behind mental clutter. Your decisions become more intentional. Your financial habits reflect more discipline. And slowly, without force, you grow into the kind of person who can hold abundance. The psalm doesn't only strengthen belief, it also exposes the habits and attitudes that are not compatible with the level of financial increase you are praying for. It reveals where you need to mature, where you need structure, where you need consistency. It guides you inward before your circumstances shift outward. And that is the true nature of breakthrough. It is not an event, it is an unfolding, a restructuring of the heart, a renewal of the mind, a strengthening of the soul. When the internal blueprint becomes solid, the external world begins to rearrange itself accordingly. As you speak this psalm daily, you are constructing something powerful within yourself. You are building a mindset that can recognize opportunity, a spirit that can carry responsibility, and a heart that can hold gratitude without fear. This is what prepares you for financial abundance that lasts. Not the kind that comes through chance, but the kind that comes through transformation. So understand this clearly. Before financial breakthrough happens around you, it must happen within you. And the psalm is the blueprint that begins the transformation. Let it shape you until abundance becomes not just something you desire, but something you are aligned with. Let it become the voice that guides you into the future you were made for. Because the moment your inner blueprint changes, your entire financial world begins to shift with it. When we speak about the power of spoken scripture, particularly this psalm, We are not referring to mere recitation or the mechanical repetition of verses. We are talking about the deliberate use of your voice as an instrument of transformation. There is something deeply psychological, almost architectural, about how spoken words shape internal reality. A thought may influence you, but a spoken word imprints you. It carries weight. It resonates in the nervous system. It echoes in the subconscious. And when those words are rooted in divine truth, they begin to reprogram the internal limitations that have quietly governed your financial behavior for years. Most people underestimate how much their financial life mirrors their inner language. The words you speak when no one is listening, the quiet statements you make about your own abilities, the predictions you mutter about your future, these shape your emotional tone. They set your expectations. They influence how you perceive risk, how you respond to opportunity, and how you navigate setbacks. If your internal vocabulary has been shaped by fear, by memories of financial struggle, by cultural narratives of limitation, then even when doors open, you hesitate. Even when opportunities appear, your instinct is to withdraw. The psalm interrupts that cycle with authority. When you speak this scripture daily, you are inserting a new narrative into your mind. It is not passive inspiration, it is active reconstruction. Your voice becomes a tool that cancels the old story and installs a new one. Neurologically, repeated words carve pathways, strengthening new beliefs and weakening old patterns. Spiritually, spoken truth clears space for divine alignment. Emotionally, it generates confidence and stability. And financially, it influences the very decisions and habits that determine whether a person remains stuck or steps into breakthrough. Notice how the psalm carries a rhythm, a confidence, a tone that elevates your inner posture. As you speak it, something begins to straighten inside you. You feel less intimidated by financial challenges. You become more aware of your potential. You see possibilities where before you saw obstacles. The psalm retrains your instinct away from fear and toward faith-based action. You start approaching money with clarity rather than confusion, with strategy rather than impulsiveness, with peace rather than anxiety. And this shift in your internal climate becomes the soil in which financial growth can actually take root. There's also something profoundly philosophical about speaking scripture. It is the moment where belief stops being abstract and becomes embodied. It moves from the mind into the muscle, from theory into practice. When you speak the psalm, you are not just repeating God's promises, you are agreeing with them. You are aligning your voice with divine intention. You are affirming a reality that may not yet be visible, but is already forming. That act of alignment is what reshapes your self-concept. Because you cannot speak words of abundance and still see yourself as someone destined for lack. Over time, your declaration becomes your identity. And identity is what shapes financial destiny. Daily declaration also builds emotional endurance. It strengthens your ability to remain stable under pressure, which is essential for financial elevation. People lose opportunities not because they are unqualified, but because stress collapses their clarity. The psalm, spoken with conviction, reinforces calm, focus, and trust. It steadies the heart so that wisdom can operate. It sharpens discernment so that distractions lose their pull. It energizes the spirit so that fatigue no longer dictates your decisions. So when I say speak this psalm daily, I am not offering a ritual. I am offering a transformation tool, a way to reconstruct your inner world so your outer world can catch up. A disciplined practice that gradually dissolves fear, strengthens confidence, and activates the mental and spiritual posture required for financial breakthrough. Because the moment your words rise to match the future you desire, your life begins to move in the direction of those words. When we describe faith as an operating system for financial breakthrough, we are acknowledging that faith is far more than emotion, inspiration, or a moment of spiritual excitement. Faith is a framework, a cognitive and spiritual architecture that determines how you interpret your world and how you respond to it. It is the unseen mechanism guiding your decisions, your resilience, your expectations, and ultimately the outcomes that follow you. You can almost think of faith as the internal software that runs the hardware of your life. If the software is corrupted by fear, doubt, then no matter how hard you work, your results will always malfunction. But when faith is properly installed, active, aligned, and fortified, your entire system begins functioning at a higher level. This is why the psalm becomes such a critical tool. It strengthens the operating system. It stabilizes the inner environment from which all financial behavior flows. And it teaches you to engage life, not from the panic of uncertainty, but from the posture of divine expectation. Faith introduces a psychological shift that changes how you perceive opportunities. It sharpens your sight. It expands your imagination. It allows you to recognize possibilities that others overlook because they are trapped in fear-based thinking. When faith is active in your life, your mind becomes more creative, your decisions more courageous, and your actions more consistent. You begin to operate from the belief that increase is not only possible, it is aligned with God's intention for you. Faith also affects your emotional rhythm. Many people sabotage their financial progress because they make decisions from emotional chaos, stress, impatience, insecurity. They react instead of responding. They chase instead of discerning. But faith introduces calm, not a passive calm, but a purposeful steadiness. The kind of calm that allows you to think clearly even when circumstances are unpredictable. You start seeing challenges not as threats, but as invitations to grow, adapt, or reposition. And that mental stability alone separates those who endure and rise from those who collapse under pressure. Then there is the matter of consistency. Financial breakthrough rarely comes through one dramatic moment. It comes through sustained, disciplined action, choices made repeatedly over time with clarity and conviction. Faith fuels that consistency. It keeps you moving even when results are slow, even when progress feels invisible. Without faith, the discomfort of waiting becomes unbearable. With faith, waiting becomes preparation. You trust that the seed you planted is developing beneath the surface. You trust that your efforts are accumulating. You trust that divine timing is working on your behalf. This trust prevents premature quitting, and quitting is the silent assassin of financial destiny. Faith also opens the heart to receive divine guidance. When your spirit is calm, when your mind is aligned, when your expectations are elevated, you begin to sense direction more clearly. You notice when to advance and when to pause. You feel nudges toward opportunities that match your purpose. You hear the inner warnings that protect you from costly decisions. This is not mystical, it is strategic spirituality. It is the combination of divine prompting and psychological clarity working together in your favor. The psalm trains you into this operating system. Every verse strengthens your internal foundation. Every declaration reinforces your alignment. And as faith builds within you, your financial journey becomes less about survival and more about strategic movement. You stop shrinking back. You stop disqualifying yourself. You begin acting like someone who expects things to work in their favor, not out of arrogance, but because faith has recalibrated your understanding of what is possible. So as you continue speaking this psalm, recognize that you are not merely praying. You are upgrading the inner system that determines the quality of your decisions and the trajectory of your future. Because when faith becomes the operating system of your life, financial breakthrough stops being a hope and starts becoming a pattern. When we say that divine provision works through human discipline and strategy, we are making an important distinction that many people overlook. God does not bless chaos, He blesses structure. He does not pour abundance into a life that is unprepared to hold it. And this is where the psalm begins shaping you in a more practical, grounded way. It does not only inspire faith, it cultivates order. It calms the inner world so you can build the outer one. It aligns your emotions so your decisions stop contradicting your desires. And it trains your mind to approach financial growth with maturity rather than impulse. There is a psychological truth we must acknowledge. People do not rise to the level of their dreams. They fall to the level of their habits. You may pray for increase, but if your daily choices are inconsistent, unfocused, or reactive, the increase will slip through your fingers. Discipline is the container that holds God's blessing. It is the internal framework that allows you to sustain what you receive. And this psalm begins shaping that framework by stabilizing your internal rhythms. It anchors your mind, breathes intention into your actions, and reminds you that abundance is not a moment. It is a lifestyle built through repeated decisions. The psalm softens anxiety, and that emotional grounding is often the first step toward discipline. A restless mind cannot be consistent. A fearful heart cannot make strategic decisions. But as you continue speaking it, you begin to notice an inner steadiness emerging. Your reactions slow down, your clarity sharpens. You start distinguishing between what is urgent and what is important. And this shift is crucial because financial success is not the result of big dramatic moves. It is the accumulation of small wise choices, repeated over time with purpose. Divine provision doesn't remove your responsibility. It elevates it. The blessing comes through your ability to manage, organize, and multiply what you have. And when the psalm is shaping your internal posture, you stop wasting energy on panic and start investing energy in planning. You begin seeing where your finances need structure, where you need to reduce waste, where you need to increase consistency, where you need to build discipline. Suddenly, the path forward becomes clearer, not because God changed your circumstances overnight, but because He changed the way you perceive and manage them. Strategy then becomes a natural extension of your spiritual alignment. You start recognizing opportunities with sharper discernment. You notice patterns you previously ignored. You sense which doors are for you and which distractions are pulling you away from your purpose. Strategy is not only intellectual, it is spiritual sensitivity expressed in wise action. And the psalm cultivates that balance by aligning your emotions with clarity, your beliefs with confidence, and your mindset with focus. Many people pray for financial breakthrough, but resist the very habits that would sustain it. They want increase without responsibility, harvest without cultivation, and overflow without order. But the psalm reveals a deeper truth. God's provision is not random. It flows into lives that create space for it. When you develop discipline, when you budget consistently, when you invest intentionally, when you pursue opportunities faithfully, you are signaling to God that you are ready to steward more. You are demonstrating maturity. You are aligning with the rhythm of abundance rather than the chaos of survival. So understand this, the psalm is not simply uplifting your spirit, it is refining your character. It is preparing you not only to receive breakthrough, but to maintain it. And this alignment between divine favor and human discipline is what transforms temporary financial blessings into long-term stability and growth. Because when your structure matches God's intention, breakthrough doesn't just visit your life, it stays. When we speak of shifting from fear-based living to purpose-driven action, we are dealing with one of the most profound transformations a person can experience. Fear is subtle. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it disguises itself as caution or waiting for the right time. Sometimes it presents itself as logic when, in truth, it is simply protecting an old identity that feels threatened by growth. And this is why so many people remain financially stagnant, not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because fear has quietly shaped every decision they make. This psalm becomes a powerful catalyst in breaking that internal paralysis. As you speak it daily, something begins to loosen in the emotional structure of your life. The grip of fear weakens. The internal narrative that once justified hesitation begins to dissolve. You start to feel a subtle shift, a growing willingness to try, to risk, to move, to step into the unknown with confidence. The psalm doesn't just encourage you, it reconditions you. It slowly replaces fear-driven instincts with purpose-driven clarity. Fear makes you shrink. Purpose makes you expand. Fear focuses on what could go wrong. Purpose focuses on what can be built. Fear keeps you rehearsing past failures. Purpose trains you to envision future possibilities. And this transition is not emotional hype. It is a psychological rewiring that occurs when Scripture infuses your inner world with a different kind of energy. The psalm begins speaking louder than your doubts. It begins guiding you more strongly than old disappointments. It becomes a stabilizing voice, reminding you that you are not stepping into your future alone. When people operate from fear, they spend their lives reacting. They avoid decisions that carry uncertainty, even if those decisions are required for growth. They choose what is safe instead of what is strategic. They stay where they are familiar instead of where they are called. But when purpose becomes the dominant force in your life, reactions are replaced by intentionality. Every choice becomes clearer, sharper, more aligned. You stop wasting years in hesitation and start investing them into movement. The psalm reinforces this shift by restoring internal courage. Courage doesn't mean you no longer feel afraid. It means fear no longer dictates your behavior. Courage allows you to attempt new ventures. It allows you to negotiate for better opportunities. It allows you to walk away from environments that limit you. It awakens a mindset that says, if God is guiding me, then the risk is part of the process. This is the kind of courage needed for financial breakthrough, because every financial elevation requires a step into unfamiliar territory. As you continue speaking this psalm, your emotional resilience builds. You become less sensitive to failure because you begin viewing failure differently, not as evidence of inadequacy, but as a stage of development. Purpose-driven people don't collapse when something goes wrong. They adjust, they reflect, they improve. They see setbacks as feedback, not finality. And this emotional shift alone can unlock financial possibilities that once seemed unreachable. This transformation from fear to purpose also enhances your ability to recognize divine opportunities. Fear blinds. Purpose illuminates. You begin to sense when a door is opening, when a relationship is significant, when a moment is strategic. You feel guided, not confused. You feel prepared, not overwhelmed. And this inner clarity positions you for breakthroughs that fear would have caused you to miss. So allow this psalm to strengthen your inner posture until fear is no longer your counselor. Let it fortify you until your decisions reflect purpose, not anxiety. Let it guide you until you begin stepping boldly into the life God has been preparing for you. Because once fear loses its voice in your life, purpose begins to speak with unstoppable authority. When we talk about speaking this psalm daily, we are talking about building momentum. Spiritual momentum, mental momentum, emotional momentum. Breakthrough is rarely a single moment. It is the cumulative effect of aligned thoughts, aligned emotions, and aligned actions compounding over time. Consistency is the force that turns spiritual truth into lived reality. And when you speak this psalm every day, you begin generating a steady internal rhythm that gradually reshapes the atmosphere of your life. Repetition may sound simple, but it is one of the most powerful psychological tools available to us. The human mind is formed through repetition. Neural pathways strengthen according to what you consistently think, say, and feel. This means your daily declarations are not just spiritual, they are neurological. Every time you speak this psalm, you are reinforcing a belief, deepening an identity, training your emotional responses, and expanding your expectation. Slowly, the old internal wiring that supported fear and scarcity begins to weaken, while the new pathways that support faith, abundance, and clarity grow stronger. Over time, the psalm becomes more than words. It becomes a rhythm. It becomes the sound that sets the tone for your day. It becomes the internal anchor that stabilizes you when life becomes unpredictable. And this rhythm is important because the world around you is constantly pushing you off center with stress, noise, and uncertainty. Daily declaration brings you back into alignment. It keeps your spirit awake. It keeps your mind clear. It keeps your heart steady. Momentum is created not by force, but by rhythm, by showing up again and again until the spiritual becomes natural and the natural begins to elevate. This momentum also positions you for divine timing. There are seasons in life when opportunities multiply, when doors open unexpectedly, when relationships align in ways you could not have orchestrated. But you only recognize these moments when you are spiritually awake and mentally prepared. The psalm trains you to remain in a state of readiness, alert, receptive, discerning. Divine timing is not random, it requires alignment. And daily repetition keeps you aligned so that when the moment arrives, you can step into it with confidence rather than hesitation. As you speak the psalm day after day, you also develop emotional endurance. You learn to persist even when the circumstances don't immediately reflect the breakthrough you are believing for. This endurance protects you from discouragement and keeps you moving when others stop. Many people miss their breakthrough not because God denied it, but because they stopped too early. They allowed frustration to interrupt the momentum. They let temporary delay convince them of permanent impossibility. But daily declaration strengthens your inner resilience, allowing you to stay engaged, stay expectant, and stay focused. And as this internal transformation unfolds, your outer world begins to shift. Favor becomes more noticeable, ideas become sharper, your actions become more intentional. You navigate conflict with greater wisdom. You discern opportunities with greater clarity. What once felt difficult or distant starts moving within reach. And the reason is simple. Your internal world has aligned itself with the breakthrough you've been declaring. You have built enough momentum to draw into your life what once seemed beyond your capacity. So when I tell you to speak this psalm daily, I am not offering a ritual or a routine. I am offering a strategy, one that bridges spiritual truth with psychological transformation, one that turns belief into behavior and behavior into result, one that keeps you aligned long enough for breakthrough to become inevitable. Because when your daily declarations create enough momentum, breakthrough is no longer a possibility. It becomes the natural next step.